Hello and welcome to the Resilience Reef, the show where we try and get some beautiful guests on who can share their strategies and stories of resilience in managing something complex, chronic, whatever is going on in their life that is seriously bothering them, and it's going on and on and on. Is what we look at on this show. So today we're going to be talking about the topic of grief and loss. Grief and loss is something I can't imagine anyone gets away from experiencing in some point, some shape or form in their lives. It's something that, you know what it's like. You only have to lose an item of, something of worth to you, whether it's a pendant or a ring or, a purse with all your cards and your finances in there, right through to losing, our serious, precious loved ones and people who are very close to us. So we will have all experienced that. If not, definitely you will experience it, I guess, in some point in your life. So my next guest is Carmel Murphy. Carmel not just had one family member who she lost, but she lost three in succession over a very short period of time. So this is something which not everyone experiences. We may experience one or two, maybe family members who we lose, but to lose three very close people in our lives is very precious and very heart-wrenching, actually. And so today, Carmel is going to talk to us about her story of what happened there and how she got through that experience, because there's a lot we can do. A lot of people cope in various ways. Some people stick to the emotion side and try and control that. And some people think, no, I'm going to go do something different. I'm going to, go on a campaign, start a charity. I'm going to do all sorts of things to keep me busy and get me, my mind off things. But, people cope. It's a very individual process is what I'm saying. People cope in their own ways. That help them to manage things better. So we're talking today about that. So I'll just introduce you. Hi, Carmel. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me here, Karen.
Beautiful to have you. So tell us where you are today.
I'm in Perth in Western Australia, although as you can tell from my accent, I'm from Ireland originally.
Beautiful Irish accent, eh? And you haven't lost it. You've been here a while in Perth, but you have still got that beautiful accent.
I've been here 33 years in Australia, but yeah.
Stunning. Stunning. And must love so much about it to stay, because it is one hell of a big country, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love it. Love it.
It really is. So, yes. So let's talk through your experience, Carmel. Tell us, first off, what kind of thing, what did you experience? Tell us about your loss and grief.
Sure, and thank you so much. It's not a thing I talk about all that much. I think we go the other side of stuff and we just keep going with our life and we don't kind of think, well, actually, no. And I know when you contacted me, I kind of thought, is my story that interesting? And you know what it is in terms of how to get past that. So the first thing that happened was my beautiful sister, who actually she passed away 5 years ago in December. And at that age, in December this year, because we were exactly 5 years apart, I was the same age as she was in this December. And it was like, what? Like this age, imagine somebody telling me that I wasn't going to be here. So it started with her, and she was ill for 15 months before she passed. So we knew the end was coming, which never really prepares you anyway, if I'm honest. Yeah. And within 6 weeks of that, so my sister was here in Perth near me. So within 6 weeks of her passing away was my dad in Ireland, which I'm sure 1,000,000% was a broken heart. So he passed away within 6 weeks. So of course we rushed to see my dad. We did get to see him just before he passed.
Yeah.
And that was in the February, and in the November, my mom was actually 90, and we chose to go back and see my mom. I said to my sister, there's something kind of stick it in my head that if we don't come, we'll regret it. So we went back to see her in the November, and by the February, the exact same date as my dad, my mom passed away. Now, both my mom and dad had been married for 65 years, and
Wow.
they got buried on their wedding anniversary 12 months apart.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it was a big, yeah, look, it was a journey. That's probably the only way to describe it, and I know that encompasses a lot, but yeah, because when my sister was diagnosed, we actually all went to Ireland so she could tell my parents face to face. She wanted to tell them that she was um,
Wow.
terminal, and that in itself was huge because to even get on a flight, my sister had lung cancer. To get on a flight was hurdle after hurdle after hurdle,
Mm,
and then to get her back on a flight to come home. So very emotional, very in hindsight, um, things just fell to the side that weren't important anymore. They
okay.
really weren't. Yeah.
So it gave you that space to focus. And of course, when you were dealing, looking after you, helping support your sister through that 15-month period where she'd got lung cancer, and then did you say she'd also had a stroke during that time?
So what had happened was she, gosh, I think you almost get one person in the family that seems to get a lot more hardships than the rest. So
Mm,
Bernie had had a bit of a journey, but she had had Hodgkin's disease many years ago. So when she was in her 20s.
mm,
And later years, they discovered that the radiation treatment she had had from that had actually damaged a valve in her heart.
okay.
So they had just discovered that. Finally, she went for surgery to get that valve replaced. So it was when she had had that operation and was recuperating from that that she said, I can't breathe properly. I seem to be out of breath really quickly. That when she went through a series of tests, they discovered she actually had stage 4 lung cancer. So the
Okay.
complication of having that heart operation and then with the cancer, so she did have a stroke at one stage where her left side was impacted. She was paralyzed down, more her leg, so she had to go into a hospital then to recuperate from that to actually learn how to walk again properly.
Mhm.
And she did have then also some short-term memory loss. So she wouldn't remember
Wow.
some silly things if she'd been to the bathroom that day or whatever. Yeah.
How did she cope with all that stuff going on for her? What was it like for her? Did she talk about it?
She was, oh, yes, she did. She was amazing. And again, being the same age as she was now, I don't know how she did it because
Yeah,
I wouldn't say she was very accepting initially because,
yeah,
it's a shock, but then she became very accepting. And she would draw out of us to tell us how we were feeling, and she would tell
okay.
us how she was. So she wanted to be at home. So her husband, they set up the hospital bed, everything at home, and Silver Chain were amazing. But I remember one day in particular. So my daughter had come from Queensland, and my sister from Melbourne was here, and another sister from Ireland, and we were all sitting around her bed. And I don't know why I remember, but there was something about Trump on the TV. We were sitting watching TV. It was the most ridiculous thing. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, she said, "Right, I want to go around the room, and I want you all to tell me how you're going to be when I'm gone."
Oh,
It was
wow.
quite confronting,
Yeah.
but emotional. And then at the end, she said, "Now I'm going to tell you how I'm feeling." And she did. And then in true Bernie style, all of a sudden she said, "Right, get me out of the bed. We're going to order pizza." And we all had pizza. It was the most bizarrest, ridiculous thing.
Yeah.
But there was also a humor in it in order to try and lighten it.
Yeah.
But she was very honest about it and very much, um, reached out, FaceTimed and everything to anyone that she had ever wanted to. Like our other son was over in the UK at the time. So she made sure our other sister was in Ireland. She really ticked off everything that she wanted to do. And her son was due to get married early December. And the doctor said she's not going to make it. She, you know, if she's still here, she'll be bedridden. And there, it was down south in a beautiful area. So they brought the wedding forward a few weeks and put her on steroids, so that they just had a quiet service at home, just with family, and put her on steroids. Now, in my innocence, the steroids lifted her a bit. And in my innocence, I was like, why can't they just keep her on steroids for the rest of her life? But of course, your body couldn't cope with that. So it was like she knew. She hung on till after their wedding, and then she passed on the 7th of December.
That's a lovely story. That's beautiful, isn't it? And how awkward it must have been for her to sit with you all around and to be brave enough to ask you those questions, and to then explore how she was feeling. And when you're in that kind of state of knowing that you're not going to be around for much longer, that's quite a courageous thing to do.
Yeah, very courageous. Yeah, she was amazing.
So you were there all the while she's declining, ever declining with her illness and her disease. How did you feel? How did you cope during that time?
It's an interesting one to look back on. And I think I'm the youngest of the family. And there's a part of me would be the comedian almost, or the fun bringer. So that was very much how I dealt with it, because I could see, and Bernie was very much like, she didn't want people feeling sorry for her, or as we would say in Ireland, maudlin. She didn't want to be, oh, you're right, you're right. So I would bring the humor and, some ridiculous stuff. Like if I said it out, people would say, that's so inappropriate. But it just brought a bit of a laugh because it was inappropriate. And again, in hindsight, I believe I knew, but I was like, oh no, that will be sometime. We won't have to deal with that. When she was diagnosed, I was working a job where I used to have to go interstate a lot. And I do remember her ringing me to tell me her diagnosis. And I was in Adelaide at the time. And I remember saying, I will not be in another state when somebody rings me to say that she's passed. So I actually resigned from that job. And I took a bit of casual work here and a bit of casual work there. I had always run my own coaching business in the background. So I was doing a bit of that. But my focus was being able to be there whenever I could for Bernie. I knew that if I didn't, a bit like going for my mom's birthday, I knew if I didn't, I might regret it.
That's quite a commitment, isn't it? To leave your job and to take any job, basically, that could be close by, that would help you be there for her. That's quite a commitment and a dedication on your part. Yeah. So the Uber thing worked, and that's because you know each other so well, right? Because you come from a family of Irish sisters and you've grown up together. You're quite very close together.
All five of us in a 2-bedroom house. Let me tell you, we know each other.
So that's close. That is close, right? You have to know each other close.
She'd been there all my life because she was there from when I was born. Yeah.
Of course. So she would have wanted nothing less than you to be lightening the mood. And she didn't want to, like you say, she didn't want the somber ending. She didn't want to feel down and fussed over and stuff like that. So you became the person who lightened that mood and gave her what she needed through that period, which I think we all want some of that, don't we? We all want some of, that's what I would like. If I'm nearing the end, I wouldn't want people kind of course, it's so hard, when it's got to be, when you're in that position and you're going to go, to know that you're out of it, but everyone else has got to deal with what's left. And that must be a difficult thing to do.
Yeah, I remember the moment that she passed, because she passed at home. And it was like something in me, just that little girl came out, and I was like, oh, I'm sorry, sorry, sorry. As if I said I was sorry enough times, she'd come back. It was kind of like the youngest girl had done something wrong. You know, sorry, 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 won't do that again, please, please, please. And I remember that overwhelming sensation of that at that time. Yeah.
Which is that natural experience we have, isn't it? Or that sense of shock and denial, and you know, I'll do anything to bring them back, you know. And of course, in a sense, that's some people have that religion or that philosophy of, you know, they're going to a better place, and at least they're not suffering anymore. So that's that kind of emotional focused coping that we have that says, you know, this world wasn't the greatest place anyway, so they're going on to somewhere better, somewhere, you know, where they can do something different or better or whatever. So that helps us feel good when we kind of say those things, because it helps us to cope better with things. Do you remember what else you did to cope? Was there anything else that significantly stuck in your mind about?
I know over the period. Yeah, I know over the period. Well, if I'm honest, I was probably in a bit of denial, Karen. Like, you know, I was like, oh yeah, do. It'll be okay. We'll just do this. So there was an element of that for sure. But over that 15 months, I don't remember a point in time, but I do remember that over that time, something changed in me in terms of, there was a bit of a, what am I waiting for anyway? Here she was, the age I am now, as I said, all her insurances, all her everything. She's done the right thing all her life. She's getting ready to retire and fulfill all her dreams, and she's gone. So something in me was like, I don't care what people think about me anymore. I'm going to not die with my song still in me. There was definitely a big change of that, but I wouldn't say it was any one point. But it was definitely over that period, something shifted and changed completely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So taking her over to the UK was quite a challenge, given that she'd got such a serious condition. And tell us about that, because that seemed
Ireland.
Very difficult thing. Sorry, to Ireland.
That's okay. That's okay. Yeah, look, she actually very generously, she had to go first class because she needed oxygen and everything on the flight. And I remember her twin sister lives in Melbourne. And so she insisted that we go first class with her and her husband. And we're going, no, we'll go down in cattle class. We'll just go on the same flight. That's fine. She said, no, she wanted us all to have the experience of being first class.
Wow.
So I remember I got the job of ringing the airline and coordinating between whatever medical evidence they needed that she could go. And I remember a few times sitting and crying to my partner, where they'd say yes, and then they'd ring and say, no, there's been a mistake, she can't come, because of lung cancer, when you fly, obviously it's going to impact it. So we did that yo-yo a few times. It was horrendously emotional to try and get her on that flight, but I knew how much it meant to her. And then when we got to Ireland, trying to do the same thing and go through the same hurdles to get her back on the flight. Yes. I remember going into our doctor in Ireland, and go, right, she needs to do this, she needs to walk there, you need to fill out that form. And even the doctor said to her, she told me afterwards in the car park, gosh, your sister's very bossy. And she said, that's just the way she's coping with it. Which was exactly true. I just knew I had to get her back on that plane because she wanted to go back home to Australia. At that point, but it was very challenging to go through, and then they'd knock it back and you go, no, I have this other letter from this doctor and this one, and had to get letters from specialists as well, not just the doctor, to say as long as she could walk 100 meters, she could actually go on the flight, because that meant she could go up and walk to the toilet. But on the flight, she had the oxygen in the whole time.
Did it all go well? Because, I mean, you were a real good organizer with all that, and dealing with the ups and downs of the knockbacks of, yes, you can, no, she can't. You can, but it's conditional. You must do this, this, and this. Yeah. And a lot of toll. It must have took a lot of stress to do that. to deal with that. So did it all go smoothly?
It did. I think our family in the long term, again in hindsight, looking back at this, we seem to be a family of get it done, and we don't look at the whatever's in the way at the time. We just go, oh, we better get it done. Very effective.
You
And I
just got
think
the
I went
goal, the
into
outcome that you wanted.
I went into effectiveness mode and got it done.
Yeah.
I can't say that the trip itself was fine. They were very good. They were very attentive. She had an oxygen bottle all the time. She kept her seat upright, everything. Yeah, it was absolutely fine. They couldn't have been any better. And of course, because she couldn't walk that far, they had her in a wheelchair. So we got first in queues everywhere and all of this, which, you know, we brought a bit of humor to as well. As you can imagine. So that was terrific. The time in Ireland was horrendous. My parents still lived in the house that they moved into when they were married. So they were there 65 years. It's a tiny, tiny little sitting room. And they didn't know anything at this stage. They just knew we were all coming home, which we all had at times. So we got the nieces and the nephews and the brother-in-laws and all the sisters were all in one room. And I remember I sat just behind my dad, and they're in two big armchairs. And when Bernie sat there and told him, and I just remember from behind my dad seeing my dad go, his whole body went down. Because he'd always had 5 daughters that, like, my dad held 2 and 3 jobs over his life to look after his girls, you know.
Wow.
And I mean, they were in their late 80s at this stage already. And he was just taking it in. He wasn't really saying anything. So it was quite upsetting. So she decided to tell them earlier in the trip so that we'd have some time in the trip to go through, you know, whatever had come up for them and things like that. So that was quite challenging to see.
How long were you over there for? Like,
I think it was about 10 days. 10 days.
Wow, so that's not a lot of time for someone to absorb something like that, is it? That must have been heart-wrenching for your dad and your mum, actually. And
yeah, absolutely.
To deal with that, knowing that that will be the last time they see.
Yeah, that was what was really, really hard, was saying goodbye to them after that trip, because they knew exactly that it was the end. Yeah,
it's always different. I know whenever I went back to the UK, I egocentric, UK centric. It was all, the most difficult thing was leaving. You know, it always was, and I always used to say, "Is this really worth it? Is it worth coming over here to have to deal with this again and again and again?" But for someone who's going over knowing that that's the last time they're ever going to see their family, and again, it must have been so difficult to deal with.
Yeah, it was. And look, my hometown is quite a hilly town, and there's a little cafe down the end of the road where my parents live, where, you know, we'd sometimes get you. I mean, Bernie couldn't even walk up the little hill to my parents' house. So, you know, we'd have to give her a lift up. It was heart-wrenching. It was heart-wrenching to see my parents. And, like, that was kind of early on, if you like. That was about 12, 13 months before she actually passed.
Okay.
And in the meantime of that, in the October of that year, my mom was really ill and almost passed away. So Bernie couldn't, but my other sister and I rushed across to see our mother. But she bounced, well, I won't say bounced back, the poor woman, but she definitely came back out of that. But there was, definitely wasn't easy on them.
Wow. So going through that with your sister and seeing her pass away in the state she did, but, you know, having some great times together, being able to share memories together for that last 15 months. But then knowing just 6 weeks later that Dad had passed away, how was that?
Dad, so at this stage, our mum was in a nursing home, mentally fine, but physically we were from a small little house in Ireland, and she needed a walking frame, it wouldn't fit. So my dad was a bit beside himself anyway, because my mom wasn't in the house. He used to wake up in the middle of the night and, pull her legs down, sit her up, give her whatever she needed, and this
Okay.
person wasn't there. So he was already kind of waking up at that same time of night and overanalyzing stuff. And then when Bernie passed, he was still doing the same, but coming from Ireland, we were brought up Roman Catholic. So the tradition is to bury somebody. Bernie had had a cremation over here, and he was fixated on that. He kept ringing me and
Mm.
going, "Why did they burn her?"
Wow.
And then he'd say, "Did they take her out of this casket and put her into this one? How did they? Like?" He just got fascinated with
Mm. Mm.
how did they do it. He didn't know where she was in his head
Sure.
because there was
That
nowhere
must
to
have been
go and
very,
visit.
very confusing for him, eh?
Absolutely, it was. And then my dad had a major fear of hospitals all his life. Even when we had babies years ago, he'd come in and say, "Lovely baby, I'll be in the car waiting for you." Like he just, I don't know, had this thing. But he wasn't very well, and two of my sisters were in Ireland, and they ended up having to um, admit him to hospital, and his organs were starting to shut down, but he was almost violent. He was so angry at being in hospital.
Mm.
We were called, and myself and my sister from Melbourne, we used to always go as far as Abu Dhabi, and then we go the rest of the way together. So we got there, literally left the airport, went to see my dad in hospital. At that stage, he was still talking, and he was going, "Carmel, Carmel, get me out of here."
Mm.
In my maybe youngest daughter innocence head had the thought that, oh, these people don't know what they're talking about. I'm going to get my dad out of here, and I'll bring him home to palliative care. And we look after him
Mm.
at home,
Mm.
because that was his one wish. And we talked to a nurse who said, "Look, he probably won't even make the trip at home." My innocence in my head again was going, "What are you talking about? He's still
Mm.
talking to me,
Yeah.
you know." And he's going, "Get my clothes out of the cupboard, take me home." And I'm going, "Just give me a minute, Dad." We went to see our mom in the nursing home to check she was all right. And of course, she was upset then. She knew he must be bad. And she refused to see him because she was in denial. She was afraid to see
Mm.
him.
Mm.
And we went back to the hospital. I think we had an hour's sleep. We went back to the hospital. By then, they already had my dad on morphine and on a mask.
Wow.
And we just sat there with him. We were delirious, if I'm honest, Karen.
Mm.
If I told you some of the ridiculous conversation that was in the room, but we were talking as if he was there with us, but we were tired. We had just come from
Yeah.
Australia,
Yeah.
myself, my sister, and two nieces. It was ridiculous. And then he passed away about 5 a.m. that morning. It was just, yeah. And it was like, what? This, no.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was, yeah, that was devastating. Not that my sister's was devastating. It was like, what? No, it's like you're still processing how, and
That's right.
yeah, yeah,
You were. I mean, only 6 weeks had passed.
yeah,
You just cremated your sister and then losing your dad. And I mean, there's a lot to process, an awful lot to process in that
mm,
space.
yeah.
And then just mum to take care of. Did mum cope well with your dad's death?
My mom, we always said it's a funny thing, conversation you have at some stage with your
Mm.
siblings. It's like, oh, if mom went first or if dad went first, who would
Mm.
cope the best?
Yeah.
And we always said if dad went first, mom would always cope better.
Hmm.
Dad was just completely mum centric. He wouldn't have coped without her. Um, but mom was in a nursing home, and mom liked a bit of attention and that sort of thing. As I said, physically,
Yeah.
our mom had very bad osteoporosis, so she couldn't, but she was as bright as a spark there. When I think back on it, we went back for my mom's 90th, as I said. We surprised our mother for her 90th. Like, we could have given the woman a heart attack when I think about it. But anyway, we didn't. So, look, she did, on the surface, cope with it, but she
Yeah.
didn't. She was
But she had to.
brokenhearted.
Yeah.
She was broken. As long as people went in to see her, she was kind of okay. But as all things
Yeah.
happen when somebody passes away, after the newness of it wears off, people go back to their own stuff. So, like, we had no warning that mom passed away. She literally passed away in her sleep. We knew nothing till the next day, till they
Oh,
rang us to tell us that she had passed in the nursing home. So then we did the trip. I don't know which is worse, doing the trip knowing that you might get to see them, or doing the trip and knowing that they're already
yeah.
gone.
It's
I
difficult.
really
Being
don't know.
so far away is difficult, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you can't. It's not like with your sister. You could adapt your life around your sister, and
Mm.
you could change things to be near. It's like when you have a, I don't know what it is from Perth, but it's a lot of miles to
Yeah.
Ireland,
It's a 24-hour trip, just
and
about.
you can't do anything. You're
No.
helpless on
Yeah.
that plane. You just you can't do anything to speed things up to get there, can you?
And on that point is that because they're not in your daily life all the time, it's almost like subconsciously they're still there. They're just in Ireland.
Mm, mm,
And I don't mean easier, but there's some part of it that is almost easier to cope with because
mm.
they weren't there every day. Whereas my sister, we would talk at least every second day. We like she literally lived only a few hundred meters away from me.
Yeah.
That was that bigger chunk out of it, you know.
Yeah. Did that affect you more, do you think, your sister then losing dad or mum? I'm not saying there's you can even
I know
compare the two,
what
but
you're saying. Yeah.
I'm just wondering,
No.
and some people, for example, if they have a long time knowing that someone's going to die, they can do a lot of grieving during that process, can't they? I know I did when my nana
Yeah.
died. She suffered for a long time, and I could grieve. By the time she'd gone, I'd already done my grieving, and I wasn't even upset at the funeral. And people were saying, "Why are you not crying?" And I said, "Because I've already grieved. We've already said goodbye a long time ago." But sometimes it's harder because then when my dad died, and he died very suddenly, that hit me the hardest because I didn't have time to tie things up and to,
Yeah.
to say the things that you always wanted to say and do with that person. Was there any sense of difference for you in terms of shock factor or grieving?
It's an interesting question. Look, I definitely agree with you. Some people do. I know some of my family and things like that that had done a lot of their grieving. For me, I think, again, in hindsight, I think I was in somewhat of a denial. This won't happen, this won't happen, this won't happen.
Yeah.
So I kind of had done I had reframed some stuff. So one thing that really saved me was being very grateful, like exceptionally grateful for having this person in my life.
Good.
Regardless of whatever. So
Yeah.
to ask me which impacted me more, it would be fair to say my sister did. I think you subconsciously, the way of life is that parents will go before you, although it's like, la, 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 I don't want to hear about it. And because she was so much of my life here,
Yeah.
certainly,
Yeah.
absolutely. And
You missed her the most. Yeah.
1,000,000%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Still do
Yeah.
to this day. I still hear her in my head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does it get easier? A lot of folks say it gets easier with time. Time heals. Has that happened for you?
I don't think time heals. I would certainly, I think grieving is so different for every person. And for me to sit here and say, oh, this is what will happen for you, and you go through these steps. At one stage, I remember thinking, like, I will never stop crying. I literally thought there was no end to this. People are saying you will. And one resource, if you like, helped me then was put a time limit on it. Like, I'm going to go the ugly cry. I'm going to do whatever. I'm going to wallow whatever for 24 hours. And when I'm finished, well, not finished, when that 24 hours is up, I'm just going to get up and move. It might be a gentle walk. And that has gone down now to, like, it could be minutes or hours. I don't know if I would ever say it's easier. I just think we learn to cope with it better. Like, there are days that my sister used to work in IKEA, just for example. And 12 or 18 months after she passed away, I went into IKEA, just a normal, to do some shopping. I happened to talk to somebody, and they said they worked there for 10 years. They said, oh, you might remember my sister, said her name. They didn't remember her. I don't know if you've ever been in IKEA. It's pretty hard to get out of. I cried the whole way through the store. because it just hit me all of a sudden. People have forgotten her. Oh my God, nobody. So I think it comes in ways, and still to this day, there can be something that will trigger the ridiculous thing. Yeah. So I don't think it's easier. I think we just learn to cope with it better.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I really do appreciate you coming on and sharing your story, because there are so many people going through exactly the same experience and not really knowing what to do, how to cope, how should I be feeling? Is this right? Is this not? You know, we do a lot of analysis, don't we, when we are going through that process of, well, how should we feel? How should we behave? Is this appropriate? And all that stuff. It's such a difficult to deal thing to
this
deal
is
with.
The answer to all that. Is it appropriate or not? Yes, if that's how you're truly feeling, then yes is the answer.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us, sharing your story. How are you feeling now, having shared that story? I know it's been a while. I know you've probably shared it lots and lots and lots of times, even if it's just with yourself, going
it's
over
interesting.
things,
yeah. No, I feel fine. When I talk about it, I do go into a very melancholic space, I guess. But one thing it certainly has done for me is propelled me on. And that's why I do more in my own business and stuff like that, because it has stopped me being afraid. Because at the end of the day, none of us are, going out with a big trophy at the end of this. But I think it is important that people realize that it's okay, whatever is coming up for you, and to reach out and get some support.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. Yeah, it's true. We're all going to go out in a similar style. We might have our individual ways of doing it, but we're all going the same way at some point. So that's a good note to end on, is how you've used that to your benefit to face your fears and to not be worried about it and think, well, time is limited on this planet and we need to go out and do things, do the things we want to do in the way we want to do them.
Yeah, exactly right.
Well, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day in beautiful Perth and enjoy that sunshine.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Talk to you again soon. Bye for now, everyone. Thanks for watching.